Now, Lee Camp might have been referring to himself. After all, he does work for a Russian news outlet. However, his words sadly could also have been in reference to my friend journalist Marzieh Hashemi, who is a U.S. citizen, was in the U.S. to cover U.S. news, following up on the Black Lives Matter story and some of the mysterious deaths of Black Lives Matter activists, and was kidnapped by the U.S. government from the St. Louis International Airport and renditioned to a D.C. prison where she remained for 11 days, including being put into solitary confinement. What was Marzieh's crime? Being a U.S. journalist inside the U.S., covering U.S. news, and, like Lee, working for a foreign news agency. Marzieh is the face and voice of English language press TV that broadcasts to the world from Tehran, Iran. I guess you could say that her real crime was meeting in the U.S. and falling in love with an Iranian, having 3 children with him, living and working in Iran after a freak car accident in the U.S. that killed her husband while she was just having her 3rd child, a baby boy. With the love of her husband's family, she was able to raise her children and work at Press TV, which as a journalism student was her dream job. That was Marzieh's crime. And since her communications, now we know, were being monitored, perhaps the authorities also knew that my last conversation with Marzieh before these sordid events was her reminder to me to send her the information about Anarchapulco because she wanted to cover your and our movement for a new documentary that she wanted to make. I was so shocked by the news of her solitary confinement, which has been deemed torture by international bodies, that I hurt my back and ended up on the floor where I am still resigned to do my back exercises until I'm 100%. But then, as Marzieh's ordeal was prolonged, I had to decide whether or not I was going to make a trip that would take me into the U.S. for a layover. I decided after consulting with my mom, no, that's not exactly what I think I want to do. So imagine, it's bad enough that the U.S. routinely kidnaps the citizens of other countries, renders them for torture to other countries, and sometimes they're never seen again. And then remember, it was Barack Obama who sought and obtained permission from the much discredited FBI, Federal Bureau of Investigation, to kill U.S. citizens on U.S. soil. In the war-driven hysteria being pumped up by the war makers, the warmongers inside the U.S. government and its complicit media, including certain alternative media outlets, but of course, not any of the ones that are at Anarchapulco, it's actually dangerous for some U.S. citizens to return to the U.S., even for a layover. But I'm not telling you anarchists at Anarchapulco anything that you don't already know, and that's why you're here. When I leave Asia for good, I might just have to break all of my chains and move to Acapulco, where more enlightened compatriots are. For those of you for whom this is your first Anarchapulco visit, I hope that your life has been changed by the information and new friends and new perspectives that you found here. Anarchapulco 2018 was a life-changing event for me. I have now added anarchism to my list of political systems that my political science students should know and have an open mind about. I've also confirmed for myself and my students that Greg Caton's psychopathocracy is a concept that certainly applies to the United States leadership and to those who unquestioningly carry out their orders, with Abu Ghraib being a prime example. But we have so many more examples of their psychopathy with the structural violence that the U.S. has normalized into a global cultural violence. But for me, U.S. wars and their attendant direct structural and cultural violence will never be normalized. And until my last breath, I will struggle against the destruction, theft, marginalization that I see around me. I have always lived that no is the most powerful word in politics, because it is only when we say no to what is that we can begin to envision what can be. Which is why I know you all are so important, because you all have a different vision for our future. You already are saying no to what is. You are already seeking something better for humanity and planet Earth. A better future that includes everyone, that excludes no one, except maybe the perpetrators of violence on others who must answer for their behavior. While listening to the presentations, I'm sure you've understood also that the Anarchapulcoists are trying to create a more just U.S. and a more just world. And I think you're on to a solution. Last year, I also mentioned the importance of direct democracy to our creation of a new way of engaging with each other. Direct democracy allows everyone to participate in the decision-making process that creates the rules and norms that govern us. It is through the practice of direct democracy, I believe, that we can practically approach the voluntarist ideal. Because in direct democracy, I surrender my sovereignty to no one. I am the one who can best represent myself. And parliament after parliament around the world, and Congress after Congress in the Americas, we have seen the failure of indirect democracy. Republics, including people's republics, that require us to surrender our sovereignty to others and then go back to those same others and beg them for service. Switzerland is not the only direct democracy in the world. Well, it is now, because Barack Obama bombed Africa's direct democracy, and that is the Green Libya, the Jamahiriya, back to the Stone Ages. Which leads me to believe that in some corners, it is actually thought that direct democracy is okay for Europeans, but for no one else. Now Europeans have seen the folly of increased centralization of authority and power in the EU and are voting to leave the EU, which is dominated by names and faces completely unknown to the average person in Europe. Nigel Farage now wants direct democracy for the UK. Ireland wants to return to direct democracy like it had in the 19th century. But these are things that you already know. Some of you saw long ago that all of the institutions in which we're taught to believe as Americans are right and just. But now we know the truth, and On the most solid foundation of the truth, we can build and recreate and improve the lot of humanity, not just destroy and kill it. So I count you as my leaders, and I'm recruiting followers. In the 1960s, the world was on fire with change. It was led in the beginning of that decade with the attitude toward peace of President Kennedy, who said that he wanted to tear the CIA into pieces and scatter them to the four winds. In short order, the next agent of change, Malcolm X, was murdered, and in the COINTELPRO papers, the FBI gloated that their plan had succeeded. In short order, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was murdered, and his friend and champion and sure to be next president was also murdered, JFK's brother, Bobby Kennedy. The FBI and CIA rounded up the decade by murdering Black Panther Party member Fred Hampton as he slept. In each of these murders, local police departments helped the feds accomplish the dirty deeds. And Mario Savio, who gave us and the movement our charge, died in poverty. Y'all, we've got to do better this time. The past tells us that individuals inside the U.S. government will kill U.S. citizens when we are on the verge of transforming U.S. policy. Yes, they will kill us and they will kill our leaders. And so we've got to do a better job of protecting our leaders and our followers. And I'm charging you with that responsibility. Now is not the time for division and hatred. Anarchapulco is supposed to be our time for healing and recharging so we can go back out there and win this struggle for truth, justice, peace, and dignity. Marzier was to document our movement, and maybe we can make that happen in 2020. But what I did make happen this year is for my son and his true believing wife, Pam, to be here at Anarchapulco right now. I wanted to show my support by doing what I want each of you to do for Anarchapulco 2020. And that is each one, teach one, each one, bring one. Now, I almost brought Marzier and her documentary making skill set, but I definitely recruited 2 people to join you, even though I couldn't make it myself. But also, you should know that it is my leader who is here with you, because my son Coy first gave an anarchist flesh and bones to me. He declared himself an anarchist upon graduating from law school and me pressuring him to say what he's going to do with his life. He gasped and said, "Mom, I'm not going to practice law. The legal system in the U.S. is way too corrupt and is not even created for justice." And so he wrote a paper that was published by the Anarchist Library entitled An Anarchist Theory of Justice. So to wrap this up now and bring my son Coy, who chose to become a farmer, up on the stage, he teaches others in food-starved urban areas how to create organic soil and grow organic food. He wants to start an intentional community, and I'm pleased to share the stage with him and introduce to you my son, Coy McKinney, the almost lawyer.
Awesome. So first I want to thank the AV people, the people behind the scenes who are making this happen. They're finding out firsthand that when you deal with the McKinneys, it's never straightforward, it is never easy. I also want to thank you guys for being here. You guys are going to have to bear with me because I am far out of my introverted comfort zone. But if I can get an introduction like that from my mom, then I guess it's worth it. For those of you that don't know, it is nearly impossible for the stereotypical black mom or grandmother to give up a compliment. So I was raised not ever doing enough. But if I can, if my mom, a 6-term congresswoman, former Green Party presidential candidate, can give me credit for turning her to anarchism, it's all worth it. So growing up was a little bit disorienting, because on the one hand, I had the mainstream news media telling me one thing, and then on the other, I had my mom telling me the other. And while she's grilling Donald Rumsfeld, I'm just now getting hair underneath my armpits. While she's bringing articles of impeachment on the House floor, I'm having my first underage drink. So it was a little disorienting. But one thing that I did get from that was one saying that still sticks with me. And that is, if it doesn't make sense, it makes perfect sense. Now, as an adolescent, I said, well, that doesn't make sense. But as I got older and became more observant of the world, that saying started to make more and more sense to me. And eventually led me to anarchism. So I know there's only one person in here who I think knows me, which is my wife, so shout out Pam. So I'll give you a little, thank you. So I'll give you a little background info into how I got to anarchism. So I was looking for some type of universal moral code that would be my vehicle for achieving some type of justice. I thought the legal system was going to be it, so I went to law school in Washington, D.C., and after the first semester, I realized that was not gonna happen. While I was in law school, though, I joined an environmental group called the Student Environmental Action Coalition. Although they didn't advertise it, this was my first intro to anarchism. They talked about the principles of horizontalism, non-hierarchy, collective liberation, and anti-oppression work. They also instilled in me this desire to want to do something. So I wanted to do something that brought all types of people together, but also involved nature. And so urban agriculture was that vehicle for me. So while I was in law school, I worked to start a campus garden on the school's campus, and I did some work study with the university's agricultural sector. After that, 2011 rolls around and the Occupy Wall Street movement started up, and I thought maybe this might be the revolution. So I jumped in. As soon as it hit DC, I was there, joined the listservs, did all that stuff. And that gave me some more articles to read and more things to digest regarding anarchism and another way forward. So while I'm in law school, it was not an option for me to quit, so I had to graduate law school, and all these ideas were kind of circulating in my head. And in my final year of law school, I had to write a paper. And during this class that I was writing this paper for, we were looking at all the different things of the criminal justice system. And it was saying all this stuff, and it made it seem as if the criminal justice system didn't actually work. Okay? So I looked at this and I said, this is going to be my last swan song for law school. This is exactly why I'm not going to be a lawyer. This is why I'm going to do the urban ag thing. And so I looked at how it operated, and I saw that the people that were actually supposed to be determining justice, the individuals involved, weren't actually involved. So first you have the prosecutor, which is infamously known for being able to indict a ham sandwich. So they have tremendous power in the process. They are representing the interests of the victim. So that if the victim had a different set of justice or didn't want to prosecute or anything, they have no say in this. They're not involved in the process. It's brought on the case is brought by the state on their behalf. Tied into that, though, is the fact that a lot of prosecutors and judges, they run on this mantra that they're going to be tough on crime, which insinuates that convictions actually equal justice. We can tell that that's not entirely true. Additionally, lurking in the background, we have the private prison industrial complex, which actually profits off of people being put in jail. So between 1999 and 2010, the use of federal private prisons increased almost 800%. So the profits that these private prisons were collecting, they weren't using that for community service. They were using that, one, to stuff their own pockets, and two, to advocate for policies that would put more people in jail. Additionally, tied up in this is the silence of the defendants. So defendants are actually encouraged by their own lawyers to be silent. So a defendant can go through a whole entire case without saying a single word. That seems unjust to me. Additionally, you have defendants who can't pay for proper legal service. So they either have to get someone appointed by the state, who they often have many cases on their roster, or they take plea deals because that's the easiest thing to do. So no surprise that all of these things circulating together has created a mess. And any student of American history knows that minorities usually take the brunt of that mess. So this is why blacks are 6 times more likely to be in jail than anyone else. Okay, that isn't that surprising if you look at the history of the state. And this is what kind of got me to anarchism. So the original thing, when I looked at the state, when I was examining the state, I read A People's History of the U.S. by Howard Zinn, and in that, he quotes a historian, Charles A. Beard, and he looked at the drafters of the Constitution. If you look at the people who actually wrote the Constitution, many of them owned land, owned slaves, had an interest in bigger manufacturing and shipping industries, okay? So they had an interest in creating a strong central federal government, okay? Essentially, it was a government, a patriarchal plutocracy that had racist tendencies, okay? And we see that it's exactly the same now. Nothing much has changed, okay? That's why we have Amazon, Netflix, Apple. None of them are paying any federal income taxes. Okay, people that make below $50,000 are more likely to get audited than these large corporations. So we have the state operating in a discriminatory manner, but then we also have capitalism, which is also working in there. Now this quote, I know it might be difficult for some of you to read, but this is from 1892. And the gist of it is that we're separated on multiple levels, race, gender, whatever. As long as we're fighting with each other and not fighting the plutocrats, that's exactly what they want. Okay, so this quote, again, is from 1892, and there have been quotes even before then. So it's the same game, okay? So capitalism mixed with the state is not a good mix. So I said there's got to be something different. And the more I read about anarchism, at first I thought it was, it's chaos, people smashing windows and all that stuff. Okay, that's part of it. That can be part of it. That can be a tactic. But it's also about collective liberation. We got to get out of this. We got to transcend the state and capitalism. I've heard people say that taxation is theft. Well, in my opinion, capitalism is theft. I use the definition that I learned from Richard Wolff, and he said that capitalism is actually the unjust acquisition of funds that should be given to the employers or to the employees, but is taken for the employer. Okay? All that profit that the employees are making, the value that they add to the product, is then taken from them and given back to the capitalists. Okay, so that is not a just way of distributing labor or the profits from labor. Okay, so co-ops is what I'm more interested in, and I think that's a more just transition. So part of that just transition and transcending capitalism is that there's two tactics that I've come across that I am trying to adopt myself, and that's revolutionary exodus, which can be also known as engaged withdrawal. So you're not buying into Bank of America. You're not going to the Safeway or whatever. You're taking your money and you're using it in a different way, in a way that does not actually uphold or contribute to the system that you don't want to participate in. Okay, so that's withdrawing yourself, your energy, your time from the state or capitalism and putting it somewhere else. And that's where the dual power and the counter institutions come into play. So for example, my wife and I, we joined the CSA a few years ago, and we'll never go back. We'll always keep the CSA. So we're directly contributing to a farm. We're not going to Safeway. We don't have any middlemen. It's just us and the farmer. Okay. So you're supporting local, and you're not dealing with any middlemen. Okay. So we're also I try and do this in my job and in my personal life. Now, we're all works in progress, and I still have a Bank of America account. So I'm working my best to get myself off it. But we're all works in progress, and this is my work in progress. So I work at a high school, and I teach urban agriculture. And this is my 5th year there, and my office is actually a greenhouse, so I can't really complain too much. And the whole point of it is that I'm trying to teach kids to do for themselves. If they don't want to be a farmer, that's fine. But at least know how to grow your own food. At least know how to make your own soil. At least know the processes that are involved with creating the food that you enjoy. The school is also located in what's called a food desert. So it's difficult for the people that live in that area to access healthy, fresh, affordable food. So this is actually, we're not only just growing food just to grow it, we're trying to make it useful, productive, and become a food hub for the community. We just got a grant this year to build an outdoor classroom, which I hope will tie into a food farm or a school farm later on in the future. So we're trying to build this up and have the students take responsibility and take ownership of the food that's grown in their community. Another project that my wife and I, we work on is in our neighborhood of Southwest DC in Washington, DC. We help run a community garden. The community garden has 2 sections. One section is for individual plot owners, and another section is for the communal space, which is open to anybody to come help out and volunteer. We have about 10 beds. We have about 800 visits a year, and we try and grow food that actually will make a difference in people's lives. We give it out for free. We're not charging anything for it. We try and make it fun. Thank you. This past year, we held our first Southwest Earth Arts and Music Day. So we had people planting in the garden beds, we had a musical performance at the end, and then we also had an interactive mural that people were painting. It was a paint by the number mural. So we had an artist come up with a cool little design, and then he had different numbers in it that correlated to different colors, and then everyone kind of chipped in, and it was great. And now it's there outside the garden, so it's a reminder of what we can do when we come together. So now this gets to my little baby project, which I hope some of you might be interested in later on or whenever. But my family's got about 76 acres in Georgia. It's currently not being used for anything, but of course I would like to get into that. I'm partial to tree houses and geodesic domes and all this other stuff, but the goal is that we would create an intentional community that would provide something for the surrounding neighborhood. Now, not only would we just be getting out of this mess that's involved with state and the capitalism, but we'd also be creating a culture and a community that, thrived on the ideals that we all kind of cherish, which is collective liberation, all this stuff, anti-oppression, enjoying life. This is a side project that I haven't gotten around to, but it's in the back of my head. Once time comes for this to really get going, I'm gonna put out a pitch, use my mom to hopefully get the word out and get as many ideas and people that are seriously involved with it who would want to participate in this. Let's see. I think that's all I got for you guys. So if you guys are interested in anything that I've talked about or staying in the loop with what I'm doing, I'm on Twitter. You can email me at that email address up at the top. And I think we're gonna try and get my mom in. I'm not sure. She's in Bangladesh, and it's like 5 o'clock in the morning there. So I don't know exactly what's gonna happen. If it doesn't work, then I'll be up here to take some questions. Oh boy, oh, she's here. Okay.
I'm here.
I actually haven't seen my mom in 6 or 7 months.
I know,
so
too long.
It's been a while, so this is kind of awkward. Family reunion in front of all these people, but that's fine. So are there any questions? You got anything to say, Mom?
No, you did very well. You met my expectations. And I was just looking for Pam out there in the audience, but we're ready to answer any questions that people might have. Thank you so much for sticking around to listen to me and my son.
Oh yeah, so we have a mic. Microphone in the center. Okay. No, it's not working.
No questions? Then that means we did perfectly.
No, not so fast. They're just getting the mic set up.
Good morning.
Good morning. It is morning for me.
We understand. We appreciate you getting up so early to do this. Thanks very much for that. First time I've been here, 62-year-old male, currently living in Florida. And I was interested in finding out more about anarchism and really interested in meeting other people who are aware of the true conditions of what's going on in our world, you know, political and otherwise, that really are awake and aware of the continuous stream of propaganda that every one of us swims in our entire life. But my question for you was, someone told me they put a question to G. Edward Griffin, and they asked him simply, is the system we have worth salvaging or not? I heard Max Egan speak, and he was saying that this is ours and it was stolen from us, it was hijacked. Do you think there's any hope? I mean, George Carlin has a real famous routine about politics and why he doesn't criticize politicians, because he says, we're all the bright young people of conscience to step up and lead the way. Where are they? I met 1,500 of them since I've been here. What can we do? Thank you.
Well, I think you get a chance to hear a response from two different generations. And my response would be very short and sweet. As long as there's life, there's hope. So yes, there is hope. And also, I would just think that now what we're seeing is really a new kind of awakening where there are more people who understand the perils of our current condition and who want to do something desperately so in order to change those conditions. But there is a dearth of leadership, and there's a dearth of opportunity to gather in organizations like events like Anarchapulco to get your juices flowing and your ideas flowing and your batteries recharged. So hopefully one day very soon, I will be in a position where I can return home, because right now I'm on the blacklist. I'm almost as bad as Mercier. And so I really need to be home so that I can sort of, as Mario Savio say, put my gears to the lever and the wheels of the machinery and tell the owners of the machine that it's time to stop it. So now, Coy, if you have any ideas.
We got another question?
Oh, Coy, I wanted to hear your answer.
See, this is exactly what I was talking about earlier. Yeah, so I mean, events like this, people gathering, getting on the same page, spreading ideas, being curious. This is I feel like what's going to get us over the hump. In 2013, I went to Burning Man for the first time, and that was an eye-opening experience. So all these, this desire for utopia or a better lifestyle, it's possible. It's going to be a challenge, but it's possible. We've seen glimpses of it when we hang out with our friends, we go camping or whatever. It's possible. We just got to start implementing it on a more strategic level.
Hi, Cynthia. My name is Ronnie. I want to thank you for all that you have done, and I really enjoy your videos, especially the ones that you have done grilling Donald Rumsfeld. I show people that video, they're just like, what is going on with this? So it really opens their eyes and makes them think, so I really appreciate that. But I've heard rumors of you possibly being on the 2020 ticket for maybe VP or president or something. Is there any truth to that?
Look, I would just like to add on before I respond to your question, is that we don't need a majority of opinion. We only need critical mass, which is about between 20 and 30%. So if we can organize ourselves in such a way that we can get 20 or 30% of the population to agree with our position, and I think we're very close to that. I think we're really close. It's just dispersed, it's diffuse, it's not organized, and leaderless is okay, but we need to have some central spokespersons as well. And so then that leads into this 2020 idea. Yeah, I've seen it floating around the internet. As long as it's floating around the internet, it's fine. But once I'm able to actually see myself come home and do something, it's just floating in the ether space. If we want to concretize that, then, and there are several different proposals that have been brought to me, but none of them is real yet. Once something is real, you'll see me on the first plane back to the US. Maybe I'll get stopped at the airport. We'll see.
Well, thank you so much.
Hello, Cynthia and Coy. G'day there, guys. I'm from Australia, and I've just moved to Latin America. I'm not sure where I'm going to settle. I'm basically planning to travel between different countries until I find an eco-permaculture style community that I'd like to stay in to do very similar work to what you're doing. So I'm very inspired, and it's actually a pretty emotional moment for me right now to see both of you here on the stage. Although one is in Bangladesh, because Cynthia, you've been, as an Australian, you've been a huge inspiration to me in all of my work and all of my mind shifts and learning about the realities of our world. And you inspired me so greatly, and I think a lot of us men can take a leaf from your book and learn how to man up and be a bit more courageous, and you definitely helped me step up and be more courageous in my life with your amazing work. So I want to thank you for everything you've done in Congress and continue to do. And also... And as a natural progression for me from everything that I was learning, from looking at YouTube and seeing what people like Cynthia were doing in the world as spokespeople for our movement and our cause, the natural progression, if I can take a quote from a video by Foster Gamble from the Thrive movie, he said, he's got a video on YouTube called My Slippery Slope into Voluntarism, or something like that. My Slippery Slide into Voluntarism. It's an excellent video if you want to watch it. And his son actually turned him into a voluntarist too, which is really interesting too. And now, and I just want to say finally, I would love to stay in connection while I'm working here. I would love to stay in touch. So would that be okay? I've got your email now, Koi. If you get an email from Paul from Australia, just to share technology, share what's working between our communities that we're working with, so we can really have one central hub of knowledge and wisdom that's getting shared, so people aren't trying to reinvent the wheel in all of these communities. So that's something I would really love to do.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
All right, well that's pretty much it. Great, thank you. Sorry.
Hi, Cynthia. One thing, when I've, say, done something that younger people or people that were out of the situation, they want to understand what I did. What I like to do is I like to tell them a story that they're not going to get from reading books. What I want to ask you is, could you talk a little bit about what it was like to face the U.S. Congress and challenge them on the lies that got us into the Iraq War? Can you tell us something, like a story or something that you know from your back end that maybe we don't know just by watching newsreels?
Oh. I think we lost her. Oh, did you get the question?
Did you hear? Did you hear the question? We might have lost you for a second.
To whom is the question directed?
You, Cynthia.
Oh, okay. And so you wanted a story, but I didn't get the last part.
Okay. So what I was asking you is, you were right there. Obviously, we've seen the newsreels. Probably everybody in this room has seen the newsreels of you challenging the U.S. Congress and about the lies that got us into the Iraq War. You obviously have a take on that we don't have just from watching newsreels. I was wondering if there's just like a story that sticks out in your mind that you could tell us, something that happened that we might not have gotten just from watching those newsreels. Just because, what was it like to sit in that chair? How were you feeling? What were the looks in the eyes of the people that were addressing you? Something like that. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Something that happened while I was in Congress that encouraged me to speak out against the Iraq War. Is that the question?
No.
And the wars in general.
Not quite. The question is, when you addressed Congress, tell me how you felt doing that when you were up against Congress by yourself. We saw the newsreels of you sitting there. You have a different view. Do you understand what I'm saying? I would like to know some inside information, I want to know your impression on what it was like to face the U.S. Congress when you were the only person doing that, on the lies of the Iraq War.
Yeah, well, yeah, bring back sorrowful memories. Well, first of all, just being there, I understand why people sell out, because it's a marvelous, wonderful thing. It's a wonderful opportunity to be there. But it's sort of like a two-way street, maybe, is that once you're there, then it's up to the people who put you there to keep you honest and to keep you straight. So I remember a story about in Ecuador, the indigenous community in Ecuador had sent two representatives of their community to Quito to represent them in the parliament. And it was a huge thing. And but when those representatives arrived in the capital city, what did they do? They became a part of the problem. And they even ignored and betrayed the indigenous community that sent them there. Well, that's a story very similar to what happens to all of us. And it's one of the concepts that I teach my students is kakistocracy. Because whenever you have indirect democracy, which is republic, people's republic, then you're going to eventually arrive at kakistocracy. So what happened was the community elders of the indigenous community decided to recall their two representatives who were in the parliament and sent and made them strip naked in front of the community. And this was like their banishment, to remind them who they were and who sent them where they had clothing. And this is something that we don't do, we the people fail to do, because for some reason, we somehow believe that the people that we sent there won't become co-opted. They're co-opted the moment they sign the pledge to Israel, signing a pledge to a foreign country. They become co-opted the moment they sign the pledge. That's before they're even sworn in. So just imagine what will happen if you sign the pledge to Israel, you sign the pledge to this, you sign the pledge to that, you sign the pledge to Bank of America, and you're signing all of these pledges, and then finally, at the end of the day, you no longer belong to the people who sent you. That is the process. And the sad thing, the inside story, is that the members of Congress that were there when I was there, some of them are actually laughing at their constituents because they know they won't be held accountable. So we have failed to protect our own interests because somehow we fail to believe or understand that these people will lie to us. They will go to the capital city and they will assume the vestments of those who pay them very well, and then they will forget about you. It happens. It's a part of the process, and it's up to you to stop that from being a part of the process until we can change our political system.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again. Thank you for participating in this very unique multi-country presentation. I'll see you later, Mom. I don't know when I'll see you. But yes,
okay.
Thank you guys.
Yeah, I know.
And yeah.